a geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause they're Cleveland and the Geek.
And welcome to Cleveland and the Geek, presented by Black Stack Brewing, now in a liquor store near you. I'm John Bonus of Twins Daily. With me, Aaron Cleveland of The Athletic.
We have a little over 3 weeks now till spring training begins in Fort Myers. John has booked his, 4-month castle that he takes over in Fort Myers. I have booked my 2-week stay in Fort Myers.
Shed.
Yeah, my shed. Or you're saying you have a shed. We got a little fun little announcement at the top here, I think, right? Are we allowed to?
Yeah.
You know what? I don't even care if we're allowed. It's my show. I'll do what I want.
We announced today earlier on Twins Daily that
you only announced half.
Yeah, we only announced half, and we're going to give our listeners a sneak peek on the second half. We announced the part today earlier that LaTroy Hawkins is going to be our introductory guest at the Winter Meltdown, who is now beyond his tremendous Twins career and even more tremendous Major League Baseball career that followed that. Was a special assistant for the Twins from 2016. He's a previous Meltdown guest, and this year he'll be the Twins bullpen coach. Yeah. But on top of that, what we'll be announcing tomorrow on Twins Daily is,
or right now,
yes,
listening or watching, new Twins manager Derek Shelton will also be a guest, along with LaTroy Hawkins at the Winter Meltdown. This is the first time we've ever had a Twins manager on the show in any capacity, right? We never had Gardy or anything.
No, absolutely no. This is the first that we've ever had a manager on there. Now we have had a Dave St. Peter, the Twins president, at one point back in the early days.
He's welcome to come on too. I have an open invitation to him. I don't know whether he likes it or not. It's an open invitation. So yeah, I'm excited about that. Should be a good Meltdown. LaTroy, I've gotten to know a little bit over the years. He's been on the broadcast side the past few seasons, so he's been around the clubhouse and stuff. But like you said, 23 years in the majors as a reliever. He's been in the front office. He's been in coaching. He's been behind the scenes. And now I'm very intrigued, not only by his decision to join the coaching staff, which I think in and of itself is kind of interesting to talk to him about, but also he's now sort of in charge of a unit that, to me, or a group that has the biggest question marks. And then also he is one of the primest examples of an unsuccessful starting pitcher who, by the way, was a high draft pick and a top prospect, and then just struggled as a starter for multiple years with the Twins, moved to the bullpen and pitched 20 years in the bullpen. I want to talk to him about what that was like for him, but then even more than that, who does he see as candidates for that? Or what is he even like? What do you even look for as this makes a guy a good candidate for that? So I'm excited. That's Saturday. It's pretty much sold out though, right?
I think so. You've got to become a caretaker on Twins Daily. If you do, it's like $4 a month to become a Twins caretaker. That's the minimum, and then it's a free ticket if you do that, and then you can buy 3 more for guests up to $20. I think last I saw we had like 14 tickets left.
Okay, so it's sold out.
But try and get in there, see if you can grab one.
I haven't sent in my +1 list, which is usually 30 to 40 people.
That's true. Yeah,
it's a real entourage.
That's right. Yeah, you might have to get those tickets before we allot Gleeman his team.
No, I'll sell
his entourage.
I'll sell them at a markup. I don't really. So yeah, that's next Saturday at Smorgies downtown, right by Target Field. So we also have some news to talk about, and some roster domino effects and all that since last we spoke on the free show. So we thought, or I'll only speak for myself. When I speak for both of us, people associate my dumbass opinions with John, and then he. When 2 weeks ago, let's say, or even a week ago, we thought we had a pretty good sense of where this offseason was headed. I don't think either of us were particularly enthused about it, but it seemed after the Josh Bell signing and then sort of nothing for a month or whatever it was, we were like, okay, well, clearly they didn't have that much money to spend. They made the Josh Bell pickup for $7 million right away to get the bat into the lineup, which I think we both were like, it's good value.
Sure.
But then once nothing else happened, we started talking about like, well, okay, if that's all you had to spend, $7 million or something, even though we saw the Josh Bell pickup as good value and a solid hitter for the lineup, well, if that's all the money they have to spend, would they have been better off spending that on a relief pitcher or two? And we also then were like, well, the relief pitcher market at this stage is pretty shallow. I mean, I think now at this point, 25 of the top 30 free agent relievers, based on Fangraphs projections for 2026, have signed. There are no, what I would say, tier 1 or even tier 2 relievers left. There's only a couple, maybe tier 3 guys like Sir Anthony Dominguez or Danny Coulombe, Taylor Rogers, etc. And those guys to me are more, lower end setup guys than somebody you want pitching the 8th or the 9th inning, something like that. So we started kind of trying to connect the dots there, and we were like, boy, this offseason seems even more overwhelming, I guess less whelming. Is that a way to put it? Than we thought. Yeah. And then within that, even we were like, are they even going to do anything with the bullpen? Do they not have any money to spend whatsoever? And then right when we thought, or I thought we had a decent sense on how things were going, again, not in a positive sense, but they go out and sign a backup catcher for $7 million and give him the first multi-year contract they've given out in 3 calendar years since the Carlos Correa re-signing for 6 years and $200 million. This is both the first time they've given anyone more than $7 million total, and the first time they've given out a multi-year contract. Victor Caratini, formerly of the Astros, he's bounced around quite a bit during his career, gets a 2-year, $14 million deal from the Twins. And similar to the Bell pickup, I like this move in isolation. I like this as a theoretical pickup. I think the price is certainly right. I'm not really in favor of giving 32-year-old catchers multi-year deals. I think you would kind of hope you learned your lesson with that, with Vasquez at similar age getting a 3-year deal, but it is what it is. They obviously wanted him. And as we'll talk about here in a little bit, Jeffers, their starting catcher, or their primary catcher, I guess you could say, is a free agent after this upcoming season. So now they have Caratini not only to split time with Jeffers this year, we think, but they also have him to, I don't know, take over the position, but they at least have him.
Or set a floor.
For 2027. And the catcher spot is, short of maybe shortstop and center field, it is the most difficult spot to fill with a major league caliber hitter, because supply and demand is always, kind of wonky with that position. But so that throws everything out of whack. But so it's interesting though. So I guess how I would phrase it is, and I don't know, tell me if you disagree, but if you told me at the beginning of the offseason that they were going to sign Josh Bell to a 1-year, $7 million deal, and they were going to sign Victor Caratini to a 2-year, $14 million deal, I would say 2 things. The first of which is solid signings, good value. And to that point, in November, at the very beginning of the offseason, I wrote an article, the premise of which was 10 lower cost free agent hitters that would make sense for the Twins given their roster needs and self-imposed budget constrictions. Number 1 on that list out of 10 was Josh Bell. Number 2 on that list was Victor Caratini. Right. So, and the prices were right around what I thought, maybe on the little bit of the lower side, obviously the 2-year deal, I don't know. And so again,
it just killed the Twins to recognize that they ended up signing the first 2 guys on the list. You know that, right? Yeah. Like, I wonder if they were like, "Yeah, we can't do that." It's,
how much money they could save?
We're never going to hear about the end. We're never going to hear the end of it.
You can get a subscription to The Athletic for like $2 a month at this point. Think how many dozens of front office people came up with the exact same idea my dumbass came up with for an article in November. But anyway, I tell you what, boys, I'll give you a free subscription. The whole office can share it if you want. You might not like what you read most days, but whatever. Don't share it with the owners. We charge them triple for that. But so I like both of these moves. I like both of these players. Look, it's no one's idea of an impact pickup, but you have to work within the constraints of the $100 million payroll, which was slashed over and over again. I think these guys are good values. I also think they're reasonable fits on the team. But what I question now, given how the offseason has played out, particularly with the timing of the Caratini signing, where we're 3 weeks from spring training roughly, and they've done nothing on the bullpen side whatsoever. They've done nothing on anything but Josh Bell on the hitting side, other than tinker with some possible bench pieces that really, as a collective, don't fit all that well in my mind in terms of, defensive coverage, in terms of lefties and righties being able to pair together. They're severely lacking in those areas, which then makes me view the Bell signing to some extent, but especially the Caratini signing. It's like, he's fine for $7 million. He's a solid backup catcher, high-end backup, low-end starter. he effectively just replaces Christian Vasquez in that role and should be a huge upgrade offensively and, possibly a downgrade. But I actually think Vasquez himself had declined quite a bit defensively over the last couple of years. But what I keep coming back to is, yeah, this is good value and it does make sense for the roster. But it really only makes sense if there were other things happening to fill in the other blanks.
Yeah,
because if you haven't addressed the bullpen at all and your bench is as weak and sort of disjointed as it is, in my opinion, and you have a million left-handed hitters but very few right-handed hitters to pair with them, you haven't improved at all defensively, you haven't added any speed, which they talk so much about, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then you go, even if it's a good value, did they really need to spend $7 million on a backup catcher?
Yeah, you said, the two things that you would have said had you known that at the beginning of the offseason. The two things I would have said is, first, the payroll must be about $130 million.
Exactly.
Like they must have gone back to $130 million payroll because those are great extra pieces. I probably would have preferred they go out and get, one big name as opposed to breaking it up a little bit. But this seems about right for them. Like they like their veteran backups. And I'm sure they went and got some bullpen arms. But that is not what they're doing. In fact, what they're really doing here is doubling down on a philosophy that we generally agree with and that we have seen over and over and over throughout this regime's history, which is they don't invest in relievers. They develop their relievers. They think they can develop that. And by the way, they don't believe the same thing about hitters. Like they're not afraid to go out and pay for some hitters, right? So, to some extent, they've been right on that. And they've been, they have developed some good relievers. They have not developed a lot of good hitters. They've had to invest in that. So that's the first thing I would have said. And then the second thing I would have said, is Jeffress still on the team?
Right. Yeah.
Which is another, which is like, well, hold it. And if I guess that would have been especially the case if I had said, oh no, they don't have $130 million to spend. They're down to 110 million. And like, oh, so what did we get back for Jeffers? Yeah, that would have been my next question, right?
Like you're just looking at it more from a payroll standpoint. I'm looking at it more from a roster standpoint, but I think it's the same point being made, which is these two pickups are solid values and solid players who do fit what their needs were. But to spend, what is now 15% of the payroll essentially on catchers seems a little odd when you potentially could have just leaned into Jeffers. And in fact, you already went out and traded for Alex Jackson from the Orioles. They sent Peyton the Eels to him 2 months ago, and he signed via arbitration for $1.35 million. And the whole premise of that, I thought, was that we got a cheap veteran, good defensive backup, and we're going to lean into Jeffers in his walk year to play maybe 90 or 100 games instead of 70 or 80 games that he's done the past 3 years, basically just alternating starts with Vasquez. And I didn't love that necessarily, but I thought, okay, that at least makes logical sense, and Jackson was cheap. And then for 2 months later, when they still have Jackson, and to your point, they still have Jeffers, to then go sign a switch-hitting veteran catcher who now, by the way, makes more than Jeffers by a couple $100,000, few $100,000, and has a 2-year deal where Jeffers has a 1-year deal. I have no problem with that, but you've now brought in what I would say is a pretty high-end backup catcher. And then the other thing is he's an offense-driven catcher. I mean, he's a switch hitter. I'm not saying he's an impact bat, but he's a solid bat. He's a switch hitter. He doesn't swing at bad pitches. He draws some walks, doesn't strike out. He can pop 10 or 12 homers. He had a 105 OPS plus, which means over the last 2 years, which means he was about 5% better than a league average hitter, which makes you a pretty good hitting catcher because catchers are below average hitters in general. That's completely different than Alex Jackson. Alex Jackson's was the pros there were cheap and good defense.
Right.
Now you have expensive and good offense with below average defense, certainly at minimum. So,
which, by the way, if they do end up having an opportunity to move Jeffers for some real value back, provides an interesting tandem, right? Like you've got one that has their strengths and weaknesses sort of complement each other. They end up fitting together. Now, neither one of them makes a complete catcher. I'd rather have Jeffers on the team. I'd rather have him. Jeffers is probably right now a middle of the order bat for this team. And I mean, as it is. So,
yeah, I mean, I guess I'm more and more of the mind that some level of position players shakeup is coming, not because I've heard from sources that they're shopping heavily, but just because if you look at, maybe the 18 or 20 guys here who have some chance to make the opening day roster that they've collected, including 3 catchers and like 7 left-handed corner bats,
right,
it doesn't fit together in a way that I think really works. And beyond that, I mean, look, it's not illegal to just have a crappy bench and guys who don't fit. We saw that last year, by the way. They had a really bad bench and no one to platoon with the left-handed hitters and no one who had speed and all that. They might just do that again. I'm not putting that past them. But the numbers game here just doesn't work. You can't have, Wallner and Larnach and Rodon and Clemens and Bell. And by the way, Caratini can play some first base and DH too. He's better from the left side as a switch hitter, which he did last year for Houston quite a bit. You can, and I'm forgetting guys. And by the way, come mid-season, if not before, you're going to hope that left-handed hitting outfielders Walker Jenkins and Emmanuel Rodriguez are in the mix. Now they're much better defensively, but you can't have all that on the same roster. You just can't, because right now you're sending Rodon probably to AAA, which, okay, fine, but why'd you trade for him if you didn't think he was Major League ready in the first place? He's 25 years old. He came over from Toronto in the Louis Varland trade. And then beyond that, now you've got like Cody Clemens, who maybe plays some first base, which pushes Josh Bell to DH. But here's the thing. You got all kinds of guys who need to be DH, including Larnach, including Wallner, and probably including Jeffers at some points, and Caratini, who's part of the draw is that he's got a decent enough bat that he can slide over to first base or DH on some days. They just have endless supplies of left-handed hitters or switch hitters who are better from the left side, who fit this description. And then you go, okay, well, you need a bunch of right-handed hitters to platoon with those guys. Who do you got? Well, we got Austin Martin, who might never hit 5 home runs in a season, and we got Eric Wagaman, who was dropped by the Marlins a month ago. So it just, you toss in, beyond that, the payroll component of it, which is Jeffers is making $6.7 million. Larnach is making like $4.5 million now. Alex Jackson is making basically $1.5 million now. Now you've brought in Bell at $7 million, Caratini at $7 million. It's like either, I guess, one of two things. Either they have more money to spend, which I hope is the case, even if they have, let's say, another $8 to $10 million to spend, go get a reliever or two, then this makes a lot more sense to me. You're still pretty disjointed in terms of fitting the offensive puzzle pieces together, but at least you can't say that precluded you from adding a reliever if you go out and spend or you make a trade. But short of that, I just look at the catcher situation. Something's got to give there. You can't send Jackson to AAA. And also, even if you could, I don't see them, given their bare bones payroll, stashing $1.5 million third catcher at AAA at this point. So something could give there. To your point, Jeffers is an impending free agent. They have shown some motivation to trade guys before they walk for nothing. You could say you could trade them at the deadline too, obviously. But then also, what are you doing with all these left-handed bats? And we said this at the beginning of the offseason, and they have since added Josh Bell, who is a bad defensive first baseman, should be DH, who's a switch hitter but is better from the left side, and Victor Caratini, who's a below-average catcher switch hitter who can play some first base DH, who's better from the left side. And it's like, what are they just like? I don't know. Do they think they get a prize if they put together the most bad defensive left-handed hitting corner guys?
I mean, what this does is gives them lots and lots and lots of options on an additional move to make before the season begins. And we've certainly seen them willing to make moves, not just as spring training begins, but even as spring training ends, to do that. Now, they always seem to sort of overvalue, or they think there's a lot. They think their left-handed bats are generally going to be more in demand, I think, than they are. I mean, we've seen that really every year, every offseason since 2019, probably. It just seems that they have trouble. They have trouble recognizing that their left-handed bats are not quite as valuable as they think they're going to be on the trade market, and I think we're probably going to see that again with Larnach. But I mean, if they wanted to, they could just say, we don't really care what we get for Alex Jackson and for Trevor Larnach. We just want to get rid of their salaries, and then basically this kind of comes down to revenue neutral move almost. It's a maybe $6 million subtracted from by those two guys and $7 million that you're playing to Caratini if you need the money to go sign some relievers. But I mean, I think more likely is that we just I didn't think it was possible for me to overestimate the amount of relievers they would go and pick up in the offseason, because my expectations were absolute. You and I had this conversation lots of times. You're like, yeah, they're going to go out and get like a first tier guy or a second tier guy or something. And I'm like, yeah, I think we're going to see a couple of third or fourth tier guys. That's what we're going to see. And what we've seen is
some fourth and fifth tier guys.
Well, yeah, one fourth tier guy, maybe, or is I don't know, on a trade.
Or is he? Yeah.
I still feel like they're probably going to get a left-handed reliever in here someplace.
Sure.
And for less than $4 million or less than $5 million at least. But I think that might be it. And even I didn't think it was going to be quite that bare bones. They could just be doubling down yet again on the philosophy of we will develop the bullpen. And I think we both have some faith and see that they have had some success in developing bullpen arms. We just don't think it can necessarily happen by April.
Right. I don't. They do have a history of that, and teams do that all the time. I mean, if you can invent some position group, it's relievers. That's the only really way you can do that,
right?
Because it's former starters, injury guys, it's scrap heap pickups. Get 50 good innings out of them. You're converting, starter prospects, of which they have several that they could convert. But yeah, I just don't think you can do that and have a group you can count on for April and May. Come June and July, maybe some of that works a lot better. But then beyond that, the thing I don't really get, and I know there are people who are like, screw getting the veteran relievers. Let's just roll with the young arms. Well, okay, I'm not against that. They can do both. This bullpen is so wide open. They have maybe 3 or 4 guys, and no one is locked in at this point. I mean, the top of their depth chart is Cole Sands, Justin Topa, and Cody Funderburk. And so the idea of, they shouldn't go sign a, $5 million veteran reliever because that'll stop them from, giving this thing over to a bunch of young guys. Do both. And in fact, I wish we could talk to LaTroy Hawkins about this today, because I suspect that most people who have spent a long time either in bullpens or building bullpens would tell you that it's actually valuable to have a 30-something-year-old guy who has been around the block, not only from an on-field standpoint, because early in the season, that guy can take some save opportunities that you may not want to hand to some 23-year-old who's, getting his feet wet in the majors, but then also you want to, from a mentorship standpoint, you want somebody who can teach these former starters how they need to prepare their body and their mind to be reliever. And so I like the Bell pickup, and I like the Caratini pickup in terms of just player and value. And I will like both of them significantly more if they still have $8 to $10 million to pick up 1 or 2 decent veteran relievers. Although, as we said, the pickings are getting pretty slim at this point. Now you could trade for one, or trade some of these excess hitters or one of the catchers for a reliever, or to clear salary, which can then be used on a reliever. If any of those scenarios play out, and by the way, I think that's probably at minimum 50-50 that something along those two lines will happen here.
Well, I do want to break that down. I want to break down sort of like all the different ways they could pivot as a result of this move. But before I do that, let's get a quick ad break in here for our presenting sponsor, Blackstack Brewery.
Usually John talks so much about them because he loves beer and he loves Blackstack.
Yes.
And I love them too. I'm going to talk about them today because we went to Blackstack last week, I think.
Yes.
And we did, back in the day, we used to do most of our episodes at a bar or a brewery. That was kind of the appeal of it. Like, you can hear the, people talking in the background, and you can hear a plate smash and all this stuff.
Because if I'm going to hang out with Aaron, I probably need some alcohol involved. Yeah.
How dare you? We stopped doing that because if I'm going to hang out with John, I need something much stronger than that. But anyway, we haven't done that in a while, but Phil Miller was our guest, and Phil likes beer almost as much as John, I would say. And like the idea of doing an old school episode at a brewery. So of course we took him to Blackstack, and I hung out at Blackstack for the first time, their actual, place on 94 and 280 that you can go to. I was blown away with how nice it was.
Yes.
And I knew they were nice. I knew everyone loves their beer. That stuff we've talked about. But the actual place it's like 20,000 square feet, but they have found it's got, a massive TV you can watch games on. It's got, a whole wall of board games if you bring kids and you want to play. They got all sorts of stuff. They got THC drinks. They got everything you need. They got endless beer supply. But I was amazed that they found a way to make a 20,000 square foot space cozy.
Yeah, that's it.
Because what they did, they made like these little alcoves with like sort of a forest environment, which is very similar to my living room that the Duchess of Marshfield has designed on her own.
Okay.
Where it's like, if you want to just hang out at the bar, they got a bar you can hang out and get beer there. If you want to hang out at big tables and play board games or whatever, they got that. But then they have on the sides and the corners like these little sort of couch
Living
areas,
rooms. Yeah,
where you can like. I'm out the dating game, but let me tell you, it'd be a pretty good first date spot or second date spot too, where it's like it's a fun environment. It's not quiet, so there's like no pressure to have some deep conversation. But also, if you don't want to hear the sights and sounds of a brewery, you can get kind of tucked away behind some. So I was just blown away by that. And the fun part for me was, we love Phil, and Phil has retired from the Star Tribune. And this was kind of our exit interview, him leaving the beat near the end of the episode. And it's on Patreon, patreon.com/Goodman if people want to go listen. In the table next to us, the guys from Blackstack came out and started stacking cases of beer. And I joked, "Oh, Phil, those are for you to take home, by the way." And there were like 8 cases of beer stacked. And the guy from Blackstack turns to me and he goes, "Oh, they are for Phil to take home." And I thought, that's just perfect. And Phil lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. He was opening up, looking at what assortment of beer they had. So John can tell you that the beer's great because he loves beer. And we've heard from so many people who have gone to Blackstack. And the whole thing is, not only can you go 94 and 280 like we did and hang out at what is a great spot, but it's widely distributed in liquor stores across Minnesota and even in other states at this point. So you can go pick up a case of Blackstack on your own too. But I can tell you, as a guy who, likes beer well enough, but is not obsessed with beer, I couldn't have been more impressed with the people and the beer and the entire environment there at Blackstack Brewing. There. How's that for our
fantastic work, Aaron?
Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about Caratini just specifically, because I feel like we kind of skipped over who he is to talk about the bigger picture.
Sure, good point. Yeah.
So Caratini, 2 years, $14 million. Interesting. 2 off seasons ago, he signed a 2-year deal with the Astros, 2 years, $12 million. So you factor in inflation. This is basically an identical deal, which makes sense. 32 years old. He's got 9 seasons of major league experience for 4 different teams. As I said earlier, 105 OPS plus the past 2 years, which is a really good hitter for a catcher. I mean, that's a well above average hitter for a catcher. It's an average-ish hitter, obviously league wide, but again, catchers don't hit as well. Now, with that said, he's 32, and you would expect catchers to really age pretty quickly at that point, physically. And 105 OPS is better than he's done in most years. I would say most years he's been a 90, 95 OPS, just slightly below average overall, which is average-ish for a catcher. Switch hitter, pretty equal splits, I would say.
Career-wise, yes.
Yeah. Pretty good contact skills. Doesn't really swing at bad pitches. Doesn't walk a ton, but he doesn't really go chase much. So he makes some decent contact. Limited power, but he's certainly capable of popping a homer. He's just like a solid across-the-board hitter, switch hitters, which is the appeal. Now, defensively...
And he's ended up playing a fair amount, in part because the Astros had a lot of injury problems with their catchers, especially last year, but also even the year before. So, I mean, amongst backup catchers, he is probably one of the top backup catchers in Major League Baseball. And, honestly, a borderline guy that you would say, no, this guy deserves a, equal playing time or a split playing time as a regular at the catching position. So.
Yes, which is all true. And he played a lot of first base and DH for the Astros because of injuries last year.
Yeah,
and,
right.
What I've heard is he was okay defensively at first base. The issue there isn't defense so much as, well, his bat is kind of middling for first base or DH. But having that as an option is fine. I don't know that this team necessarily needs another left-handed within a switch hitting component, first base DH option, but whatever. And so, all of that describes, like you said, a high-end backup or a low-end starter, which for $7 million a year is fine. It's just an odd allocation of very, very limited resources by the Twins, I think. But also defensively, so I reached out to Chandler Rome, who covers the Astros for The Athletic and has covered Caratini for the past 2 years, to get a kind of a scouting report on him. And what he said defensively especially was pitchers really do like throwing to him in terms of how he manages a game, his communication skills, his pitch calling. He's caught a couple of no-hitters. I know one Yu Darvish no-hitter a few years ago. But what he said is pretty weak arm. Pitch framing fluctuates quite a bit year to year, generally not amazing. Was good at blocking pitches last year. Probably overall a below average defensive catcher, but one that is not going to be a disaster unless the arm slips a little bit more and teams really start running wild. Most of that description could also describe Ryan Jeffers,
right.
Which you could either say the Twins have a type in terms of their catchers, or you could say that makes one of them sort of superfluous or a luxury item or something like that. So the questions with Caratini are, is he essentially just going to replace Christian Vasquez in a full-on just timeshare with Jeffers? It's funny, over the last 3 years combined, Jeffers has started 232 games at catcher for the Twins, and Vasquez has started 232 games at catcher for the Twins. An exact 50-50 split.
Right.
And for long stretches when they were both healthy, they would almost literally just alternate starts, kind of regardless of the pitcher. So if he just replaces Vasquez, then you're talking about somewhere between 75 and 85 starts behind the plate for Caratini. And then I would estimate probably maybe another dozen or so starts first base DH as the need arises, which I think that makes sense. But again, what do you do with Alex Jackson?
Right.
And maybe they can dump him and clear that 1.4 million off, but then you give up Peyton Eels, who I'm not super high on, but he had some potential to be a utility guy in the majors. Could they carry 3 catchers? You could. Gardenhire would be excited about that. I just don't see how you can feasibly do that with a 4-man bench. I think even before signing Caratini, their sort of defensive coverage or day-to-day utility with potential bench options was pretty stretched. And so this would stretch that way, way more if you had 2 catchers out of 4 on the bench.
We should mention we've even had conversations this offseason with Falvey. He has said, they expected Ryan Jeffers to be having a bigger role or to be, not in a 50-50 split. They weren't looking for that. We'll see whether or not that perception has changed. And, frankly, how excited Ryan Jeffers is about that, because I know Ryan Jeffers was excited about playing more or starting more games. Now, this doesn't mean that he couldn't. Maybe what they're going to be doing is trying to do something where they have both of them start 80 games a season, but they end up having, each of them, or maybe having Jeffers do, a third of his games also in DH, something like that. We'll have to see how they end up splitting the allocation, but that kind of gets to the larger question of roster suddenly getting kind of crowded, whether that means moving. I mean, at the very least, I don't really see room for Alex Jackson on this. I mean, like you said, the third catcher piece doesn't make sense. If you end up having 2 backup catchers on your roster, that leaves you 1 backup position at shortstop, 1 backup position at center field, and that's about it. That takes care of it.
And the problem there is someone like Austin Martin, who I would argue certainly deserves a bench spot.
Right.
They don't really trust him in center field, so he can't check that box unless they just want to push it and play him there. But then again, that's certainly not going to improve your defense. And if James Outman doesn't make the team, then what'd you trade for him for? It's similar to the Rodin conversation.
It also means somebody like Cody Clemens. They've talked about relying on pretty regular in the team. Like, there isn't really room for him. He can't play backup shortstop. He can't play backup center field.
Right.
He can't play backup catcher. Like, where is he?
The only way there's room for him is if you send Rodin to the minors. Clemens could play like first base, Bell as DH. But then again, if you do that and you still have Larnach, that means your corner outfield against right-handed pitchers, which is most days, is going to be Larnach in left field and Wallner in right field. We saw how ugly that was last season, and B, the Twins have gone out of their way to use Larnach at DH because they don't trust him defensively, and they feel like he wears down physically and is more susceptible to injuries playing the field. So again, it's not that the pieces themselves are bad, although I certainly don't think they've collected a lot of great bench options. I mean, they've really been waiver claims and minor league guys and stuff. It's that they don't really fit together. You just have a bunch of like corner pieces of a puzzle, and it's like, how do we fill in the center of this puzzle without what we have? Right. And it doesn't do you any good to have a collection of talent if it doesn't fit together, because then you're not utilizing in a way that maximizes it. And I would say the way you do that is to not put bad defensive players in roles where they're going to have to play defense every day. And then within that, to not put this wide assortment of left-handed hitters in roles where there is no right-handed component of a platoon that you trust. And so that is why I look at this more and more and think something's got to give here. There is some next move. There is some follow-up move to this stuff, whether it is to shed salary to go get a relief pitching help, to trade for relief pitching help, or just to trade some of this excess catchers and left-handed hitters to bring back some prospect value to, add to the farm system. Because I just think that, and we haven't even mentioned guys like, Eddie Julian, who's still on the roster, who has no path right now to a job and is out of minor league options. So would have to be waived at the end of spring training anyway. So I don't know. And, the idea of, well, can't they just play Caratini at first base? You can, but he's not super experienced there. And from what I heard last year was just sort of passable there. And B, he's a guy with a 94 career OPS with a career high of 12 homers. Do you want him as your first baseman? Which again, it doesn't really fit here. And to your point, if they had $135 million payroll, or to my point, which is really the same point, if they had already added a reliever or two, they had already added a good backup here, a good backup there, then you can look at this and go, all right, well, it's just, icing on the cake. It's a luxury item. It protects them. And, for 2027 too, behind the plate, which is always going to be a need. I like it. But in this sort of weird influx spot 3 weeks from spring training, it just seems like a really strange allocation of resources, which sadly makes it so that the Bell and the Caratini pickup, which I think were sound moves for solid players at lower than expected prices in my mind, I kind of view them as like, okay, but it would look a lot better if you slide this guy and this guy out of the equation and things can fit a little better.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder if the plan is here, we're going to make another move, and that move is going to, move somebody off of this team. If somebody comes shopping for Larnach, if somebody comes shopping for Jeffers, if somebody comes shopping for Wallner, now you've suddenly got a little bit of flexibility to consider, what you can get with some of those. So,
but to your point, what is the market for those guys?
Right.
I mean, what is the market for Trevor Larnach? What is the market for Matt Wallner? And well, I certainly think there are plenty of teams who, if Ryan Jeffers were made available for a minimal return, would be glad to snatch up a starting caliber catcher even 1 year from free agency, because he's making $6.7 million, which is a bargain for that. I mean, the Twins just signed a backup catcher for more than that. But I also wonder, okay, 1 year of Ryan Jeffers, if they were to be open to trading him because of Caratini, and you compare Caratini with Jackson, well, first of all, that's a downgrade.
Yes,
that's worse than Jeffers.
Absolutely. Right. It is a downgrade for 2026 for sure. Absolutely. Right.
And what are you going to get for Jeffers? Like, unless I'm wrong about that. And I think Jeffers is a good, solid player, and the price is certainly right. And the musical chairs of catcher means that there are going to be a team or two, let's say, who were pursuing JT Realmuto before he re-signed with the Phillies. If there were two teams that were pursuing him, they might go, all right, well, now we got to trade for Jeffers. Maybe you get something significant for Jeffers. But if you don't get something significant for Jeffers, what does trading him and replacing him with Caratini really do, other than, I guess, maybe clear up? I don't know, because you're not clearing up money, because you've essentially just replaced it. You're maybe getting some prospect capital instead of letting Jeffers leave for nothing. So I'm not predicting any specific domino to fall here.
Right.
Jeffers, Larnach, whatever.
Yes.
I'm just saying collectively, these pieces do not fit together, either in a way that equals a bunch of wins, which is most important, but even just in a way okay, you're 4 days into the season. There's a left-handed pitcher on the mound, and somebody has an ankle sprain. How are you building your lineup? And it's just, you can't with this group. So I don't know. If along with this signing, there was a wink from somebody that was like, hold on, we got a couple more.
Yeah, right. Yes, that's right.
By the way, I will not be surprised if that is the case. But until that happens, I'm like, okay. And that the sad thing, going back to the payroll, is if they did just stick with $135 million payroll, which is the range they've been in the past couple of years, let alone 165, which they were in 2023, I would be not celebrating. These are, low wattage moves, but I would be saying these are solid moves. These are good depth moves. And in a way, they do remind me, going back 3 or 4 years, of like the Michael A. Taylor pickup or the Kyle
or even
Farmer
Harrison
pickup.
Bader last year.
Right. Where it's like, okay, a high-end backup or a low-end starter to provide depth. But the thing that happens first and foremost when you cut payroll over and over again and go from 160 to maybe 105 or 110 in the span of 3 years, you have to trade your highest paid player, which is Carlos Correa, and then B, your depth suffers because you don't have the luxury of giving $5 million, or in this case $7 million, to a backup player. So that they continue to go down that path suggests to me that something else is brewing here, or I just don't see the vision, which is always possible, certainly. Whether because the vision is bad or because my eyesight is bad, I do have glasses, that I just do not see the vision. So I don't know. It's an interesting signing, certainly.
Yeah.
And if you're going to spend on depth somewhere, I would say catcher, shortstop, and center field are the spots to do it. But center field,
it makes spring training that much more interesting too, just to kind of see where they think they are going to be using people, where they're starting to start people in various games, road games versus home games, etc. And just kind of see, like, I wonder who they really think can play center field.
Right.
I wonder who they think can handle. I wonder if Luke Keishill's going to be in the outfield or the infield, or where they think Cody Clemens can handle second base. Like, there's a bunch of stuff like that that's going to be interesting to watch.
We talk about shortstop because that's one of the spots you can't really fake as a backup.
Right.
Like, you need a guy who can capably play shortstop. And that's why they kind of phased Willie Castro and Kyle Farmer out of that role over the years, because they were like, we don't think these guys, they've aged out of being able to play shortstop. But it's beyond that. You look at their entire infield right now.
Right.
You have Royce Lewis, who's been one of the most injured players ever. You have Brooks Lee.
And by the way, I'm not sure who his backup is right now.
Well, this is what I'm getting to. It's not just
Right,
just shortstop. It's the entire infield.
Right.
Royce Lewis, you're not counting on him for 150 or even 125 games. You're going to need a solid guy who can play third base. I don't know who that would be right now. Brooks Lee, who hasn't proven offensively or defensively that he's a starting caliber shortstop, and by the way, has missed a bunch of time with injuries over the last couple of years. Well, you need a solid backup shortstop. They don't have that. And then even at second base, Luke Keishill has had 3 significant injuries in the last 15 months or whatever, while playing a total of 40 games, and is also a question mark defensively. Who's the backup at second base? The days where you had a Willie Castro or a Kyle Farmer that you could just pencil in, well, he starts whenever those guys don't. Right now they're choosing between waiver claim Ryan Kreidler, waiver claim Vidal Brujan, and minor league signing who might be just completely washed up, Orlando Arcia, and that is kind of your backup infielder group. So again, luxury item at catcher, 15% of your payroll at catcher. Your backup infielder's not much, and outfield might even be, less than that or similar to that.
In the past, we could take a look and say, well, if the shortstop goes down, turns out our second baseman's a good enough fielder that he can cover shortstop for a few days or something like that. We don't even really have that right now. Like that, Keishill is definitely not going to be sliding over to shortstop if somebody gets hurt. And I don't think Royce Lewis is ready to jump into shortstop if somebody gets hurt. And so now you've got to have somebody dedicated for backup shortstop. We should probably talk about that move, because that is another move that happened. And you want to hit sponsors first? You want to finish anything more you want to talk about Caratini?
Let's do the last couple of sponsors here.
Okay.
First, just
and then jump into the rest.
Clear the docket of that. Yeah.
Well, I will talk about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is an app you can download. Your fantasy football season is over. I know my fantasy football season over, but that doesn't mean, and you maybe, it's a little tougher to find a good fantasy basketball league or fantasy hockey league or something, but that doesn't mean you're going to be watching the games anyway. You got some opinions on, whether Rudy Gobert is going to get 9 points tonight, or how many rebounds he might get, or maybe you want to say Joan Berenguer. Is that how you say his name?
Yeah.
I always want to say Juan Berenger, which is not going to be right. But anyway, you can still do that stuff. You just do it on the Prize Picks apps. You just go out to the Prize Picks apps. You take a look at your favorite teams or the games that you're going to be watching. You see whether or not what their prediction is on how many points they might get, rebounds they might get, all kinds of other stuff. You decide, okay, I'm I think they're going to get more than that one, more than that, or there's no way they're going to get that much. There's going to be less. And you start selecting those players, choosing more or less. You build a lineup that way, and you throw some money on it. And the best part is that you don't even have to throw your own money or much of your own money if you get it through Gleeman and the Geek. So all you do is you download the Prize Picks app today, and you use the code Gleeman, and you're going to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code Gleeman to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineups. Prize Picks. It's good to be right.
Our last sponsor today is Hims. And if you're watching on YouTube, you might say these guys could use this also. And if you're in the if you're in the same group, so Hims can provide a lot of stuff for guys: hair loss, ED, weight loss, all kinds of stuff. We're focused on the hair loss aspect here. I don't know why they've determined our audience is ripe for that, but perhaps they just saw pictures of the hosts and they just extrapolated from there. But here's how it works: Hims offers convenient access to a range of prescription hair loss treatments with ingredients that work. You can get chews, you can get oral medications, you can get serums, you can get sprays, whatever fits what you're looking for the best. Doctor trusted ingredients. You shouldn't have to go out of your way to feel like yourself. Hims brings it right to you with 100% online access to personalized treatments, no hidden fees. They just send it right to your front door in packaging that doesn't have bright flashing lights that says what it is. And here's how it works: for simple online access to personalized and affordable care for hair loss, ED, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/Gleeman. That's Hims, Hims, hims.com/Gleeman for your free online visit. You answer some questions, you fill it out, they point you in the right direction. That's hims.com/Gleeman. Featured products include compounded drug products, which the FDA does not approve or verify for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. See website for full details, restrictions, and important safety information. Individual results may vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Hims.com/Gleeman. I mean, you mentioned Vidal Brujan. They claimed him off waivers. He adds to Kreidler, who they also claimed off waivers.
Yes.
They DFA'd Ryan Fitzgerald, who would have been in that utility man group. He was claimed off waivers by the Dodgers and then waived by them or DFA'd by them. He might be going overseas, it sounds like. They DFA'd Mickey Gasper to make room for Brujan. The only reason Brujan is even worth having a 2-minute discussion instead of a 20-second discussion at this stage, because, they might DFA him before spring training, who knows, is that prospect hounds are going to recognize that name. He was a top 100 prospect back in the day coming up through the Rays farm system. I think 3 straight years he was in Baseball America's top 100. Back then, he was switch hitter. He had really high-end speed where he could steal 30, 40, 50 bases a year. He bounced around defensively, hit for a high average, didn't have a ton of power, but he really looked like a potential regular. Now he's 27. The Twins would be his 6th major league team if he makes the team. He's played 260 games in the majors, and he's batted 199. Yeah. And this is why he's available on waivers. I'm not trying to act like they should have gotten a great player on waivers, because they don't. But, he's along the lines of Arcia, Kreidler, Fitzgerald, kind of a marginal major leaguer at this point. The draw with him is switch hitting ability, the ability to play everywhere, although he can't really. It's a little bit like Willie Castro at the end of his Twins career, which is he can play everywhere, but you're not going to want to play him at shortstop. You're not going to want to play him at center field. You're not necessarily even going to really want to play him at third base. Kind of like Castro by the end. He's really left field, second base. You can in emergency start him here or there. He's going to have to hit in that role. And to the point we were talking about earlier, given the bench, you cannot have a utility man that you don't trust to play shortstop when Brooks Lee is your starting shortstop. Yeah. Because Brooks Lee is going to need time off. Brooks Lee has questions attached to his performance as well. You need at least someone who you can put out there a couple times a week who can pick it at shortstop. And that would be Kreidler possibly, except he's a career 140 hitter in the majors. So Brujan has kind of been claimed off waivers. He gets tossed into that utility man competition. Arcia, Kreidler, not Fitzgerald. There may be a couple other guys that they could pick up and add to that, but it's a pretty low wattage. It's a pretty low wattage group.
I mean, it's good. It's going to be a roster battle for lack of a better word, at spring training that we'll
Or
be
like-
watching. We will be watching how those three are used, where they're used, which one's starting in the early innings, which one's facing the prospects in the late innings. Because I mean, right now, one of those three guys is going to be on this roster, right? I mean, we're going to have. There is nobody else unless they bring somebody from the organization that's going to feasibly play shortstop as a backup right now. So
yeah, it's more of a roster pillow fight than a roster battle.
there you go. All right.
But so yeah, that's the situation. Bullpen wise, we talked about that. I mean, they're running into two things here, which is kind of why over the last several weeks, maybe you've sensed us getting a little bit more frustrated with the lack of bullpen additions, which is the things they're running to are what we discussed at the beginning of the show after the Caratini signing, which it's not clear they have the resources to go get bullpen guys. But then B, even if they do have, I don't know, $6 million to go sign someone, there's like maybe 3 or 4 relievers I would even want at that price point, or in a role that is going to immediately be the closer or the setup man, even for a non-contending team. And that's coming from someone who doesn't really believe in the closer mystique and aura. I just don't think they're capable of being the best guy in a decent bullpen. You're running into both those things, and that's what happens when you do nothing to rebuild the bullpen for the last 4 months or whatever after trading away your 5 best guys. And, I don't see the vision. That doesn't mean the vision is not right. I absolutely am certain that they think they can, move Connor Prelip or Marco Raya or, one of these starters, Festa, Zebby, Mick Abel, Taj Bradley, Simeon Woods-Richardson, et cetera, because if they don't trade Joe Ryan and they don't trade Ober and they don't trade Lopez, you have like 7 or 8 major league starting pitchers for 5 spots, and you're either sending the excess guys to AAA or you're going to move them to the bullpen. And 6 months from now, we might be here saying, hey, that guy really worked out well in the bullpen, much like Joan Duran or Griffin Jacks or Louis Varland. These are all converted starters going back. Rick Aguilera and Taylor Rogers, Eddie Guardado, Joe Nathan, Glenn Perkins. I mean, these are all the same storyline. I'm not against that as a concept. I just don't know why you're putting all your eggs in that basket unless you just don't care about the eggs or the basket for 2026, which is maybe Occam's razor here. But here's one other thing I'll say about Caratini. The reaction to all these low wattage moves is always, well, they don't really care about winning. From fans, I'm saying. They don't really care about winning. They just want to save money. Well, the care about winning, I think, is debatable. We've debated that. If they wanted to save money, they wouldn't give a backup catcher $7 million.
Right.
There's no reason to do that. And even at this point, if they trade Jeffers, they don't save any money because they've just sort of had a net neutral. You bring in a $7 million catcher and you trade a $7 million catcher. The part about not caring about winning and saving money was Alex Jackson. Not to be too harsh on Alex Jackson, but he's a backup catcher who costs $1.4 million and is a career 150 hitter in the majors. Caratini is a high-end backup catcher at the very least. And so if they didn't
in that way, it's kind of the type of guy we wanted to see them go and chase to fill their bench with, right? This is a veteran who can actually bring something to the table. This is akin to Michael A. Taylor. This is akin to Harrison Bader. This is the kind of move, or even to some extent Vasquez. Like this is the sort of player that you, like we said, if you have 130, 140, 160 million dollar payroll, you're filling it with, right? But that's exactly the wrong take on this, is that, they don't want to spend any money.
Now it's the wrong take on this specific move, which again leads me to view it in a strange way, because it's like, if you were planning to have $105 million payroll, what are you spending $14 million out of the 105 on 2 catchers when you have all these other glaring needs? But I will say, this Twins regime, which began in 2017, Derek Falvey, has shown a real predilection to building up and investing in catchers. Their literal first move they made of real consequence was giving a different Houston Astros catcher, Jason Castro, a 3-year deal for like 20-something million at the time. And that worked out mostly fine. He got injured in the last season. And then from there, a little later than that, they had Garver and Jeffers paired together in a way that tried to maximize that while alternating starts, which I know neither of them were necessarily thrilled with. And then after that, You go out and sign when Jeffers has a down year and Garver is no longer in the picture because he goes elsewhere. Then you go out and give a 3-year, $30 million deal to a 32-year-old, I think, Christian Vasquez, who, by the way, at that time was a Houston Astros catcher, if only for the last 2 months of the season. This is the third time they've given a multi-year free agent contract to a Houston Astros catcher.
That's funny.
Is kind of interesting.
I mean, I like that you raised that point because you're right. That is of the things that we have learned about this front office. We've learned that they think they can build a bullpen on the fly, and they're leaning into that. And we know that they clearly prioritize or are willing to pay for catchers. That's something they will go out and purchase.
Yes.
And also, it's also something they have not been particularly good at developing internally,
Right.
with the exception of Jefferson.
We also know that there is never enough left-handed hitters who can't play defense on a roster. It is funny when we did, what did we do? 5 years of this podcast, 6 years of this podcast, but we had written 10 years before that about a Terry Ryan led front office.
Right.
And one of the things that we were kind of excited about in 2017 when Falvey and Levine replaced Terry Ryan was not Terry Ryan exiting, but the idea that we could wipe the slate clean with all we knew and we thought we knew about the modus operandi, the operating, the preferences and the
sure,
what we could assume the front office would try to do.
Right.
And after covering the same general manager in Terry Ryan for like 15 years, it was fun, or at least I viewed it as fun, to not know anything and to have to learn that.
Sure.
Well, now it's almost a decade later, and we've been covering the Falvey-led front office since 2017, and it's much different than the Terry Ryan regime in the sense that they approach things much differently. They've built a much different infrastructure. They've gone for much different coaches and managers and stuff, and they are doing things from a roster building standpoint that Terry Ryan wouldn't have done. But we have sort of landed in the same area where it's like,
right.
You almost don't need to see the roster and stuff. You go, okay, well, they're going to want to shore up catcher.
Yeah.
They're not going to invest in the bullpen, and they're going to have at least 2 more left-handed hitters around at all times than you think really makes any sort of sense. And there's other things within that too, in terms of how they develop players, who they try to draft, et cetera, et cetera.
Who they offer arbitration to, whether or not they trade them away. We always have one player like that every year. Yep.
Yeah.
So we've seen it all this offseason. Yeah, they're playing their greatest hits.
That's true. Now, I would argue that playing those greatest hits have not led to a tremendous amount of success, big picture, certainly over the last 2 years, and leads you to a place where you seemingly, as a front office, have not been as sort of fluid or flexible to build this roster. They've been very kind of stick to their guns a little bit in what they're doing, which is fine, except you need to have success doing that.
Yeah.
And the thing I always come back to is, what we say on this show a lot about a lot of things. 2 things can be true. And people in all walks of life have a tendency to hear something and eliminate everything else, where it's like, oh, I like to eat pancakes. It's like, oh, you're saying you don't like waffles? It's like, no, I like waffles too. I'm just saying I like pancakes. It's fine to say we think we can build bullpens from scratch. That was clearly part of their thought process of the fire sale, trading their 5 best relievers,
Yes.
3 of which were built from scratch themselves.
Right.
But why does that preclude you from adding 1 or 2 veteran pieces to an 8-man group to stabilize it on and off the field? It's fine to continue to acquire left-handed hitters who can't play defense, including Josh Bell and to some extent Caratini. But you actually have to get production from those guys, and they've struggled to get production from those guys. And then beyond getting production from those guys, if you're going to have 1 million left-handed hitters, you need right-handed hitters to sort of counteract them and to cancel out their weakness against left-handed pitchers. And they haven't really ever prioritized that. I mean, I rant about that every offseason. Where's the right-handed hitters to pair with these guys? And you get into spots where you're either not platooning, which we saw last year. Hope people were happy. Lefties can't hit lefties, but everyone wanted to see that for so long. Or you get into a spot where they are platooning, but the right-handed half of the platoon is just not that good anyway, so it doesn't equal anything. So that's where I'm at. It's like these pieces don't fit together. That doesn't make them bad pieces or too costly as pieces, but you need to be able to react to that and stay fluid because building talent is a huge part of a front office, obviously. But if the talent, I mean, if you acquire, I don't know, 10 good second basemen,
right?
Well, that's real. You have a lot of talent. Where are they playing? And this is just a less extreme version of that. Is like the pieces. I mean, this is not anything new, but a team is not necessarily just about the value of the individual pieces. The sum has to be as much or more than the parts. And I just don't see a way to do that, and we don't sit here a lot. We're not hot take guys. We're not guys who are trying to draw clicks by saying they're going to trade this guy or I can't. But I just think something has to be coming here, or I'm going to be sitting here on opening day being like, let's
see how they piece this together. I mean, we may get a better sense of that with Shelton when we talk to him, maybe at the Winter Meltdown, right? I will say this, like, people in crisis, but also even more so organizations in crisis tend to go back to what they do. They don't have room for creativity. They don't have the time or resources to go and explore and try new things, right? And what you're seeing right now is a baseball team, an organization that has slipped from payroll from 165 million down to 140 million to 120 million, now to maybe 105 million. And as such, you don't have the opportunity to go and sort of wait things out, or so you are looking at, or try something new. You are going to rely on your greatest hits, and that is, we're seeing them lean into their same philosophies that they have practiced for, like you said, almost a decade. And we will. I'm not sure they're necessarily going to clean this up or with another move here. But I can also see where this organization likes the reason they establish a floor every early and most off seasons is because they like the ability to pivot and be flexible and try something different. This does give them that. And I'm sure they're excited about that. Like, they're excited to see what opportunities come their way. I just don't necessarily know that those opportunities are really going to be there, especially not in late January and February and March, where they might have been there in, say, November or December, right? That it's the catching market is super thin, but and the good players have, most of the good hitters have signed, so maybe there's room for a late addition of Ryan Jeffers onto the trade market. Here's a real significant starter that, especially if you're a team that has some money, you can bring him in for 1 year, sign him to a long-term deal. He'll never hit the free agent market, and you've got your catcher solution here for the next 3-4 years. Maybe that's going to be. Maybe there's a team out there that's like, I don't want to have to worry about similar to the Twins. I don't have to worry about my catching stuff. Like that's a position where you're just stuck, right? Or maybe it's allows them to take a look at somebody like a Wallner or a Larnach and say, we can bring somebody in here fairly cheap. We have to give up something, but not a lot for a Larnach, and maybe something a little bit more significant for a Wallner. And now we've got the flexibility to make that move. So it'll be interesting to see if any of those opportunities really come their way. I wouldn't be shocked if they do. I also wouldn't be shocked if they get to the end of spring training and they look at it and they go, we're going to have to lose some pieces. Like we that opportunity never came along. We're going to have to either, lose some guys to waivers, or therefore let's make some moves somewhat under duress, because opening day is here and we've got to straighten things up.
I mean, just to be clear, there aren't that many guys. I mean, you're not obviously, just so people are clear, like, he's not saying they're going to have to waive Ryan Jeffers or Trevor Larnach.
Not like that.
But you're saying some of these bench guys. I don't think that highly of the collection of bench guys. Sure. And so the idea of waiving them, I don't view as like, oh my God, how can they waive Ryan Kreidler or, Eric Wagaman or whatever it is. I think these guys are pretty marginal major leaguers as is. I'm looking at it more as the opportunity cost. And to me,
yes,
it's like, okay, you got to the end of spring training, and if you didn't make some of these follow-up moves that we're speculating about, you are going to lose some guys from the position player group. I don't think there's going to be huge losses, but then I don't think what remains is that good of a lineup, or that functional of a lineup in terms of day-to-day utility for platooning, for injuries, for defensive coverage and all that. And then if they do all that, I don't care who they're losing on waivers if I still look over to the bullpen and Justin Topa's pitching the 8th inning every day.
Right,
Like that just doesn't make any sense. And if that's the case, well, what's the point of any of this? Like, what is the point of keeping Jeffers for his last year before free agency? He's not going to be with the Twins after 2026. They're not going to sign him to a long-term deal. And then what is the point on that level of bringing in Caratini? So I like these 2 pickups, only assuming there's 1 or 2 more moves, whether a trade or a trade and a signing of relievers. And if they can pull that off over the next month or so, or even 6 weeks, 8 weeks before opening day, John, if you're going to blow your nose, man, step back from the mic at least. I'm not making fun of you. It's -5 degrees, but don't lean into this, blowing your nose into the damn thing. So yeah, you mentioned just a couple things to end here on. So Willie Castro, who we mentioned, as sort of the aging out of backup shortstopness as a utility guy, was a free agent, and I was very curious to see what kind of deal he got. And he ended up getting a 2-year, $12.8 million deal, sort of the Victor Caratini deal,
right? Yeah,
from the Colorado Rockies, which I'm shocked that he got a second year. It's interesting that $12.8 million is exactly double his salary with the Twins last season, which was $6.4 million.
Oh.
So they gave him double that, and it tells me a couple things. One, I'm going to guess this is a situation where he had 1-year deals on the table from better teams, and the Rockies, because they have a hard time signing free agents, gave him a 2-year deal, which, first of all, good for Willie Castro getting a 2-year deal.
Yeah, could be.
But then there's also a much clearer path for playing time with the Colorado Rockies than there would have been on a contending team where he probably would have been a utility guy. He might be a 400 at-bat guy there. He's going to be a 600 at-bat guy in Colorado. And then the other thing, looking at the rest of his career, it is going to help either stave off a decline or help you actually, recreate some of the value you lost in a down 2025 season for Castro to hit at Coors Field.
Yeah,
I mean,
hopefully.
Now, most teams
didn't work out that way for Kyle Farmer last year.
Well,
but
right.
yeah.
When it doesn't work, then that shows you the guy's just cooked, basically. And it's just the end of the line, which I think it probably is for Farmer. But now most teams are smart enough to be able to analyze the Rockies' hitting and pitching performances, 30 years later within the context of Coors Field and what it does, not just to boosting the home numbers, but to deflating the road numbers, because there's sort of an after effect. People, if you're curious about that, there's a lot of good studies on that, where Coors Field makes you really, really good at home as a hitter. But then when you go out onto a road trip after being at home, it takes you a few days for your mind and your eyes
to
and
adjust,
your body.
right.
There's a hangover effect where you're actually worse off on the road for having played, let's say, 10 straight games at home or something. But on the most basic level, if Willie Castro has slipped to the point that maybe his true talent level at this point is a 240 hitter, well, Coors Field might help him hit 270.
Right,
and no matter how much analysis the next team that might pursue him might go after and say, well, we need to adjust for that, it's a lot more palatable to give a guaranteed contract to a 31, 32-year-old Willie Castro if he hit 270, no matter the circumstances. So good for Willie Castro. The last couple things, just little news and notes here to mention before we head out. Twins settled arbitration-wise with everybody who was arbitration eligible except for Joe Ryan,
Right.
who submitted a figure of $6.35 million. The Twins submitted $5.85 million. You guys can do the math on that. $500,000 difference, which is that's 7%, something like that.
Yeah.
Different.
We had a really nice breakdown of what arbitration means and how it works and all the other stuff on a Patreon last week, where we ended up having a much longer discussion about this. If you're interested in, what this arbitration is and how it works, I would say you check. The short version is this: the Twins have them under team control. They can either agree to a number, or if they don't agree to a number, then the two sides each submit a number blind, not knowing what the other one's number is. They both go in front of an arbitrator. That arbitrator does not work for Major League Baseball. It's just somebody who, for labor disputes or any arbitration disputes, ends up having to choose one number or the other. So at this point, if it goes to arbitration, if it goes in front of that arbitrator, they're going to have to choose either a $5.8 million or a $6.3 million salary. both players or both sides could still agree to something, and if not, then the Twins get to trash trash Joe Ryan in front of Joe Ryan as they try to explain why he's only worth $5.8 million while he's trying to convince them he's worth $6.3.
Yeah, so. I mean, it's not a great situation. It's why teams and players generally try to avoid the hearings because, like you said, the whole point of the hearing is to try to convince somebody that you're worth more or less than the other side thinks you're worth. So
and you're in the room for it.
Right.
Yeah.
There's always some hurt feelings. We've talked to guys who have gone through that before on the show. I think people have tried to view that because of the circumstances of the trade deadline with Joe Ryan, where he thought he'd been traded and then he wasn't, and he was one of the last guys standing, and there was all kinds of rumors, and he was talked pretty openly about how weird that situation was, how frustrating it was, what the future holds for him. He's been pretty open talking about that. And so people see then that he didn't settle and everyone else settled, including Larnack for $4.5 million. And it's like, well, is this him sort of planting his flag in the ground and, declaring war on the Twins or something like that? No. I mean, we saw that with Barrios back in the day. There are some players and agents who will intentionally not settle because they want to go through with a hearing to try to push the price point for future players who are in the same spot. In other words, if Joe Ryan, as a starting pitcher with his statistics and his age and his service time, gets $6.35 million instead of $5.85 million, when Joe Ryan goes back to arbitration next year in his final year of arbitration, the starting point for that year's salary is going to be based off the 2026 salary, which is potentially higher. But then when the next Joe Ryan, some other 28, 29-year-old starting pitcher who's made an all-star team or two, goes in there, they can use Joe Ryan as a comp. And so as an industry as a whole, there are a lot of agents, and then by definition, they're players who are like, we're trying to push forward the pay schedule on this stuff. And you need some outlier guys who are going to go through with a hearing on that to make that happen. Now, it could
similarly for the teams, there are sometimes teams who want to establish, no, we will go to arbitration. We will fight you in arbitration because we want to make sure that you understand that we aren't just going to give into or meet you in the middle. So you pick a high number and we meet you in the middle. In fact, and one of those teams has definitely been the Twins. They ended up doing that they basically admitted they did that for that very reason with Kyle Gibson as a few years back. So.
Now, it might also be true that Joe Ryan isn't thrilled about this situation, but he certainly wouldn't be the only veteran on this team for whom that was true. Sure. Couple other very quick things. Max Kepler suspended 80 games for a steroid test. He was using, I won't try to pronounce it, but it was a drug that is not for human consumption and not in a way because, it's illegal in sports, just literally not for human consumption. And instead, it is something that is given to livestock to stimulate muscle growth in livestock, which is interesting. He's a free agent and is now suspended 80 games and was probably facing a pretty tough free agent market to begin with after a couple of down seasons. So that is of note. We mentioned very briefly Thad Levine as part of the 2017 changeover in the front office. Thad Levine, former guest of the show. There's a whole 2-hour chat, and there's video of it too, with Thad Levine that we had. When was that? Right before the trade deadline.
Yeah.
It was one of my favorite shows.
July,
we've done. You can get that on patreon.com/Gleeman. Thad Levine has joined the Brewers front office as a special advisor to baseball operations, which is kind of one of those roles. It's not dissimilar to the role Baldelli took with the Dodgers front office, where it's like, it's an in-between role for someone who has just left a job or been fired from a job, but is well-respected in the industry. You kind of join a front office, and they figure out a role for you. They figure out what you're going to be good at. And then the next kind of hiring cycle, the next offseason, that creates a scenario where it's like, okay, well, now Thad Levine can try to get a GM job or try to get a whatever, or Baldelli can try to get a manager job. And then you mentioned Michael A. Taylor. Joining the Twins as a spring training instructor for outfield defense and base running. And he's also going to maybe make the rounds a little bit in the minor leagues during the season as kind of a roving instructor. They recently said that Ryan Presley, who just retired as a pitcher, is also joining them in a similar role from a bullpen/pitching standpoint. Ryan Presley was a successful Twins reliever and then got traded to the Astros and became an all-star World Series champion, a regrettable trade, probably. They got Alcala in that trade. But it's interesting to see him come back to the Twins as opposed to stay with the Astros. It's also interesting to see Michael A. Taylor come back to the Twins, for whom he only played 1 year out of, 15 years in the majors. But those are two veteran, good players, well-respected on and off the field. In my opinion, never a bad thing to bring those guys into the organization. From their point of view, it sounds like they're both considering, but not necessarily locked into trying to have a coaching career of some kind. Yeah. And so this is kind of the first, put your feet in the water. Come to spring training, talk to some guys, do some things, maybe go to the minors a little bit, and then 6 months later, do you like doing this? Do you feel like you're good at this? Is the travel something that your family is going to put up with? So it's I like, it's kind of like an internship. Yeah, you're hoping down the road, the interns you hire are good and they like doing it, and maybe you elevate them to full-time jobs. These interns just happen to be, guys who have $50 million in the bank. That's right. Okay. Speaking of $50 million in the bank, thank you to our sponsors who have made this episode free. That's right. Black Stack, obviously the presenting sponsor.
That's right. And we would like to give a special thanks to them. They're now being distributed to all of Greater Minnesota. So stop by your favorite liquor store or the Black Stack tap room. Grab your favorite brewer. Try something new. Also, if you're at that tap room and you say, Gleeman of the Geek sent me, you'll get $2 off any 4-pack that you buy. So we will be back later this week on the Patreon. We will be back at some point. We also will be trying to record the Winter Meltdown. Yeah, some of that will be available free. Some of all of it's going to be available for the Patreons as soon as we can get it cleaned up and loaded. So we'd love to have you join us at patreon.com/Gleeman. Otherwise, we will talk to you again soon. And welcome to the end of this video. There's lots more. For another, just click on one of these boxes.
Or click on this circle in the middle to subscribe to all of our Twins Talk.
Thank you.
Cleveland.